Open world games promise us everything: freedom, exploration, immersion, choice, but sometimes freedom just means getting lost in a beautifully rendered wasteland with nothing to do. For every masterpiece that defines the genre, your Witchers, your Breath of the Wilds, your Skyrims, there are just as many that confuse open world with open void. Worlds that sprawl for miles but say nothing. Cities that look alive but act dead. Games that mistake quantity for quality and somehow manage to make freedom feel like homework. Now, in a previous episode, I talked about 10 of my favorite open world games, and today's episode is the flip side to that. I'm counting down the 10 worst open world games I've ever played. Not necessarily the worst ever made, but the ones that left me questioning why I ever wanted a big map in the first place. Let's begin. This one hurt me because Metal Gear is one of my favorite series. But Ground Zeroes is not an open world game, it's an open parking lot. A glorified demo that tried to sell itself as a standalone experience. You've got one small base, a handful of side missions, and a 2-hour story that ends just when it gets interesting. The stealth is flawless, the graphics are incredible, but the world? Pointless! It's a sandbox without any toys! It's like being handed a Ferrari and told you can only drive it around a parking lot. Worse, it set expectations for the Phantom Pain to be the full realization of that world, but instead it just recycled the same bases over and over again. Ground Zeroes is the ultimate tease, proof that freedom means nothing without something worth doing. There's a lot to love about Jak II, but its open world is not one of them. Naughty Dog wanted to go from cartoon mascot platformer to gritty urban crime epic, and the result was a tone-confused, rage-inducing mess. Haven City looks great until you realize it's just one long corridor full of guards who exist solely to ruin your day. The hover car controls are very floaty, the mission structure is punishing, and the checkpoints are practically non-existent. Every death means redoing the entire mission, including the drive across the map, which is a special kind of torture when the police attack you for sneezing near traffic. It's ambitious, yes, but it turns open world into a punishment loop. I loved Saints Row 3. It was absurd, over the top, and very much self-aware. Then Saints Row 4 came along and said, what if we stopped pretending this is an open world and just turned it into a superhero simulator? Superpowers in this game break the entire design. Once you can leap over skyscrapers and sprint faster than cars, the city becomes irrelevant. Why drive when you can fly? Why do missions when every side activity feels like the same explosion on repeat? The world is a playground, but one without purpose. And because it reuses the same exact city from the last game, it feels more like DLC with laser beams. It's fun for 10 minutes, then exhausting for the next 10 hours. Bethesda's first Elder Scrolls game promised the entire continent of Tamriel, an open world where you could travel anywhere. But what it really gave you was a procedural filler stitched together by loading screens. Cities look identical, dialogue repeats endlessly, quests feel like AI-generated fetch loops. It's like watching someone build an MMO using a calculator. The ambition is admirable, but the gameplay is punishing. Slow combat, constant random encounters, and long treks across miles of featureless terrain. You can feel the DNA of modern Elder Scrolls here: exploration, freedom, world building, but it's buried under repetition, and nobody likes that. I constantly describe the Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall as a fractured masterpiece, a technical marvel that tried to give us the entire Iliac Bay, 2 full provinces, hundreds of towns, thousands of dungeons. The problem? They're all procedurally generated nonsense. Every city feels the same, every dungeon is an endless maze of gray brick hallways, and the world's scale actively works against it. You'll spend half your playtime lost in auto-generated terrain that looks exactly like the last place you were lost in. Bugs are everywhere, falling through geometry, impossible quest triggers, random crashes, and yet buried under all that chaos is ambition. Bethesda's dream of infinite freedom was there. It just wasn't ready. It's the digital equivalent of a first draft that accidentally shipped. Impressive for its time, but very much exhausting now. 18 years. 18 fucking years. That's how long fans waited for Shenmue 3. And after all that time, what we got wasn't a revival. It was the worst time capsule you could have ever opened. Everything about it feels trapped in 2001. The stiff animations, the robotic NPCs, the endless fetch quest disguised as life simulation. Sure, it looked great in screenshots, the villages, the sunsets, the quiet atmosphere, but there's zero spark. You chop wood, a lot. You collect herbs, all the time. You spar with the same 3 dudes every day while the story crawls along at what I could only consider glacial speed. It's not broken, it's just obsolete. Where the first Shenmue defined a genre, the third proved that trying to live in the past is the quickest way to make your world feel dead. Long before Driver or Need for Speed, Vette tried to simulate San Francisco, complete with hills, landmarks, traffic, and cops that could chase you anywhere. On paper, it's amazing. In practice, it's like playing Grand Theft Auto underwater. Frame rates in the single digits, controls that feel like you're turning a ship, not a sports car, and visuals that flicker like a strobe light every time you change direction. It's ambitious, don't get me wrong, it's even kind of visionary, but it's not remotely playable. You can technically explore all of San Francisco, but after 5 minutes, you'll wish you couldn't. Historical value aside, this is what open world looked like before computers were ready to handle it. A bold idea years ahead of its horsepower. Developed by Synapse Software, New York City, the city that never sleeps, was one of the earliest attempts to recreate an urban sandbox, long before open worlds were even made a concept. It promised freedom. Drive anywhere, explore Manhattan, live a digital city life. In fact, when I started my genre gauntlet on this particular genre, this was the first game I played. But that sandbox, in reality, it's a ghost grid. Buildings flicker in and out, traffic loops like a broken record, and the map, while ambitious for 8-bit hardware, feels more like a blueprint than a place. There are no pedestrians, no atmosphere, just the hum of an empty metropolis. It deserves credit for trying something that ambitious in 1983, but playing it now feels less like exploring a city and more like being trapped in a broken simulation. Technically impressive, emotionally barren, the city never sleeps because it was never really awake. Assassin's Creed Unity should have been Ubisoft's crown jewel, a fully realized Paris during the French Revolution packed with detail and scale. Fuck yes, sign me up. Instead, it launched as a technical tragedy. Faces melted, bodies warped through the floor, crowds spawned by the thousands only to freeze mid-action. Even when it worked, the city felt bloated. Hundreds of collectibles, side missions, and empty apartments you could climb into for absolutely no reason. The open world looked stunning but felt lifeless. Paris was more like a museum, gorgeous to look at, but you couldn't touch anything without breaking it. Ubisoft eventually patched it, and years later it's almost respectable, but first impressions matter, and this was the game that made everyone roll their eyes at another map full of icons. Before Rockstar perfected chaos, Grand Theft Auto was a very messy experiment. Top-down, awkwardly fast, and controlled like a toy car with a broken antenna. Now the idea was revolutionary, a criminal playground where you could steal any car, run from the cops, and make your own fun. But actually doing it... brutal. The camera fights you, the missions are extremely cryptic, the map repeats the same gray city blocks until you can't tell one district from the next. It's open, but it's empty. Freedom without direction. When people called it a cult classic, I get it, it was daring for its time, but playing it now feels like visiting a very early prototype that's half finished and barely functioning. A landmark in concept, a nightmare in execution. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What are your least favorite open world games out there? Feel free to let the community know down in the comments section below. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was just a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you can do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the videos and the projects that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortefyre out.